Happy November, everyone. I don't know if anyone else is feeling the reality of this year is almost done and asking everyone, where did time go? How is it already November? 2025 has been by far the fastest year of my life, and it's also been one of the busiest, given so many things that are going on in the world. And I feel like the health industry is evolving rapidly. I'm seeing trends and patterns that are mostly good, in my opinion. I think there's always that inundation of information, which is something that we try to do our best to wade through in terms of deciding what kind of information we want to purvey to you guys, who we very much appreciate all the support from. So the education attendance, the business side of things, making sure that our products and all the education required to know how to use them the best is reaching you guys as the clinicians and also as the people who are probably benefiting from these products yourself. Today, we're going to tell a little bit of a different story. We're finishing off the year with this Gut as an Ecosystem three-part series. I hope you enjoyed part one of prebiotics. Today, it's part two, our bread and butter, probiotics, but it's told through a little bit of a different lens because we have done the probiotic thing multiple times. We'll continue to do it because research keeps changing and our awareness and perspectives based upon clinical successes we hear about, feedback we get from all of you, things that we read and research on our own because we're always trying to read and upgrade as a company. But I want to share a little bit of the little known information in the regards of, oh, I don't want to go to the end. I want to start and give you guys something in suspense. In regards to what it really takes to make a flagship probiotic and to continue to try to be an industry leader in a segment that continues to get more and more crowded. And in some regards, I think the crowding is a little bit of an us two product. What I mean by an us two product is like, oh, well, let's just make a probiotic popular. Everyone's talking about them on social media. As you'll come to find, we started this conversation in our little way well before anyone thought about the word probiotic in common knowledge. So it's going to have me start here in terms of defining what the microbiome is, because this word gets thrown around. And you know me, I'm very big on word association and accuracy of language. You know, the first definition of the microbiome was only established in 1988. Like in science, that's an infant. So this term, the microbiome, is a combination of words of micro and biome, and it was a characteristic microbial community in a reasonably well-defined habitat. I love how vague that is, which has distinct physiochemical properties as their theater of activity. I don't know what else didn't make the cut, but that is a very tenuous and very general way of describing what we now know as the microbiome, which has evolved in its definition over the last, what is that, if my math serves me correct, 37 years. And currently it's defined, or its accepted definition is a community of commensal, symbiotic, and pathogenic microorganisms within a body space. Notice how it didn't say within the gut, within a body space or other environment, because there are multiple areas of the human body that have their own microbiome. And if anyone wants to take a very interesting deep dive and possibly become cross-eyed at the halfway point of reading an article and wear your propeller hat, Google something called the holobiont evolution. And the holobiont is the most advanced, up-to-date, I guess it's still a theory or it's a postulated framework of what the interaction or the interfacing between us, the physiologic organism that houses all of these physiologic organisms, or I should say, physiologic pathogenic commensal organisms in a very dynamic flux state. I don't think a lot of people think about the fact that the microbiome theoretically is changing second to second, as is all of our physiology. So every little decision you make in regards to your health will be shifting the course of where your microbiome goes and evolves versus where it potentially gets stuck, which is where we come in. It's important to remember that wherever there is a mucous membrane, a community of microbes live. So you have the skin microbiome, you have the respiratory airway microbiome, you have the sinus microbiome. In women, you have a vaginal microbiome. But you know, the HQ of them all is the gut microbiome because of the quantity and the diversity of bacteria that reside there. Um, Theoretically, become some of the microbes that migrate through your system, and if there is a problem in one microbiome, as I've said before, there is always a problem in multiple microbiomes, which is why when someone sometimes takes a probiotic, their eczema gets better or their psoriasis clears up temporarily. It's because there's nothing separate in the human body. The conditions, the specifics, the environments, the influences are numerous. To be a master of the microbiome, I don't know if that's a term, maybe I just made it up, you really do have to understand where the structure and the function and the anatomy interface and understand the details of the environments which house the microbiomes, which we call the terrain. The stomach is a very inhospitable environment, whereas the colon is an incredibly hospitable environment, which is why you see the patterns of distribution the way they are. 10 to the power of 1 or 2 and 10 to the power of 11 or 12 is a much, much, much bigger number of difference in terms of microbial quantities and communities than people really think about. So the stomach has the least dense population. The small intestine should be fairly regulated. And now we're seeing more and more people have issues of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, pyloric sphincter dysfunction, ileocecal valve dysfunction, various things that are causing migrations of potential microbes from one location of the gut to the other. And all of the influences on the right-hand side are things that are directly and indirectly, negatively and positively affecting the microbiome. I actually read a very interesting article yesterday that said besides antibiotics, the two newest classes of drugs that are being described as potentially causing, I would say it's probably more than potentially causing, certainly causing long-term changes to the gut microbiome are prescription antacids and antidepressants, believe it or not. We forget that everything that we swallow and ingest, our microbiome has to post-process. So that's why some drugs are not effective in some people, whereas in others they are. And the difference is the gut microbiome and its influence on how it metabolizes things. So it's really knowing this top-down and bottom-up approach. Within the gut, you have microbes, metabolites, proteins, and microbial genes that are influencing our own human genes. So these microbial populations are creating various things that are these metabolites that we call postbiotics that we've covered. These metabolites have the ability to influence the local environment, i.e., the gut immune system. They can influence the gut epithelial lining, i.e., the mucosal barrier, the epithelial cells themselves, the absorptive cells or the physical barrier cells, and also the cells that generate the mucosal production, which keep things in check. The pattern that we see is if there is a breakdown in how this ecosystem is meant to operate, if one aspect of influence goes out of balance, and eventually all things go out of balance, that physical barrier, that chemical barrier, the quantity and the profile of metabolites all shift, which shift microbial populations, which means that certain populations of bacteria become underpopulated or overpopulated, which creates a shift from a commensal-based population to a pathogen-based population. And then the things that everyone talks about in the digestive industry, leaky gut, immune activation, inflammation, the breakdown of tight junctions, the activation of the immune system, are all precursors to the things that cause most neurodegenerative, inflammatory, or long-term degenerative conditions. A lot of those have root in having the gut as a massive influence in the pathogenesis of said conditions. So this is really the crux of everything when it comes to the human gut and the microbiome, because the reality is we still know far less than I think we believe that we do. And there's so much more to elucidate in terms of understanding the interplay between all of these things. We have a really good understanding of the gut microbiome and the associated axes of how it influences and affects human health. But ultimately, the thing to take away from what gut-based supplements like probiotics are trying to do is this is the problem that we are trying to solve. We're trying to push the body into a state of health and eubiosis and away from a state of disease and dysbiosis. So a prebiotic, a probiotic, a digestive enzyme, a systemic enzyme, a gut nutrient supporting supplement are all trying to put in a signal to the gut and to the body so the body can heal itself and rebalance the populations of dysbiotic pathogens and hopefully rebuild a healthy gut ecosystem within the microbiome. So that's a lot of preamble. And probiotics are really the most powerful catalysts of this effect within the body. But the question that I want everyone to be able to answer today is, What is it that makes a good probiotic? And I'm just going to let everyone pause for a quick second and just contemplate that. What is it that you use as your own criteria, your identification patterns of understanding what makes a good probiotic? Because my first answer might surprise you. What makes a good probiotic is perspective, good story, and the knowledge gained from said stories and said perspectives. What do I mean by that? Well, formulating a supplement is not necessarily an easy thing. And Jeff and I were talking yesterday, actually, and he gave me this wonderful analogy that I felt compelled to use. If you take a virtuoso musician and a regular person and you sit them down, say, in front of a piano, or you give them each a guitar, the quality of the music that is created by the person plus the tool is going to be very different depending upon the person's skill, their level of training, and their natural talent and ability to do something very special and very specific. So that's the first perspective. It's a little clue because Therilac came to be because we had a virtuoso who had a vision for what he wanted to do with a company to help people with their health through the lens of the digestive system. The second perspective, and this kind of ties into the story, is sometimes uncovering unique information in a place where you didn't intend to look for it, rather, it found you. There's a methodology when it comes to trying to solve a problem. And it's basically, if you're an expert in a field, a strategy is sometimes ask someone who is in a tangential field or someone who's totally not well versed in the specifics that you're trying to look at. And they may give you an answer or an insight that is very unique because they're not indoctrinated by institutional or barriered thinking. A lot of the times amazing things come from aspects of discovery that become absorbed by an industry because of what becomes uncovered. And that's where we get into our story today, because a lot of people don't know the true background. And I do want to draw attention that hair was better in the 70s. I don't know if fashion was, but if you guys have a magazine copy of American Dairy Review in 1975, it might give you some good hairstyle tips. That's when this was actually from. So our founder, who's actually no longer with us, he passed fairly recently, unfortunately. He was a unique individual. He was a microbiologist, and his whole start in the industry was understanding the nature of growing microbes to influence the food industry. Very specifically, how microbes, their characteristics and behaviors could influence cheese starter culture and the fermentation process to make microbes work more effectively in their ability to help us process food. Because microbes came before humans, and when they get put to work, they can do some pretty magical things. If anyone's ever had wine, you'll know exactly what I mean. So this was the beginning in 1975. The the interlinked relationship with microbes defining one's path and career in life started. And we even have a copy of the US patent filed by Randy Porubcan in July of 1975, talking about stabilized dry cultures of lactic acid producing bacteria. So this is a little bit of a foreshadowing to an idea that would evolve slowly over time. And this patent, which was for a company called Chris Hansen's, still today is one of the foremost manufacturers of high quality microbes. And Jeff can verify this at the end potentially, but we still buy from this company today. So this long history of interconnected, not only professional development, but business relationships, has an amazing interconnected history and path that has led to the development of many of the products that we have today. Then from here, the next evolution was knowing how to use microbes to influence the earth, specifically natural and organic ways to use microbes to help increase crop yields rather than potentially poisoning the earth with chemical pesticides, herbicides, and various things that a lot of farmers use to maximize crop yields, but could be detrimental to the landscape and the microbiome of the earth. So it started in 1975 with food, it moved to 1990, and this is where we're doing things in a crop yield way in terms of understanding microbes and their interrelation with the earth. Again, taking the insights and the various aspects of knowing deeper and deeper the functionalities of how microbes behave and why behavioral tendencies of microbes become very important things when you want a specific outcome. And then that led to just post Y2K. This is just after the year 2000 hit. And everything that was learned from the formative years, and this is when our other fearless leader, Mr. Jeff Thurston, came on board. The company was founded, and all of the information that was gleaned was then put to answering two very specific questions. Knowing what we know about microbes, the fragile nature of their existence, and the fact that we want them to get to certain places and do certain things, Randy wanted to come up with a cutting edge way of how do we get the microbes into the gut, knowing that the conditions of certain areas of the gut, stomach, the small intestine, are quite harsh and inhospitable. And how do you wake those microbes up when they're there? Because what most people don't understand about microbiology, microbes must be woken up to adhere. And if they don't adhere to the epithelial lining, they can't exert their effects positively. Therefore, you can't actually induce the change that you're looking for inside someone's gut who's suffering from some sort of digestive distress. And one story that's quite interesting that led to the generation of lactostim was one day when Randy was trying to basically grow a series or grow a culture within a vat, they forgot to add something called polysorbate 80. Polysorbate 80 is an essential aspect of allowing the microbes to increase the speed of replication and population. And then as he developed a greater understanding of what the market wanted and didn't want, he realized that there is a better way that you can do things more naturally because most people in the health industry see things like polysorbate 80, potassium benzoate, and various other preservatives that have very specific use as something that is not desirable and potentially unhealthy. And fast forward till today, this is what basically allowed us to get to the present day form of the company, where in 2019, the company merged with US Enzymes, a partner brand was formed, and enzymes and probiotics became the essential one-two punch factor of what it is that we've done, hopefully, in our opinion, that you guys agree with better than anyone else. So now that we know what makes a good probiotic is understanding that the story of how it came to be sometimes can't be planned, but it's the information and the insights that we gain from the process of learning and adding those learning variables to solving problems. The second aspect of what makes a good probiotic, technically and functionally, is the merging of art and science. The science part is taking all the known variables and understandings of both those variables in isolation and into a connected system. We know what a microbe does, but what does a microbe do when we add it to a series of other microbes and we have an influence through what a probiotic supplement can do? The art of doing so is also incorporating all of those variables, condensing it down to a simple, actionable, and effective end product, all supporting practices to ensure the product integrity. Said differently, making a product simple to use, easy to educate and understand, and ensuring that day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year, the quality and the integrity of all the practices that go into making those products are upheld so that you guys, the end users, can get the best quality products possible to help the people who are in need who come to see you for your assistance. So now we're going to go through the various aspects of what it is that we think about and consider when it comes to making those products, the upfront scientific considerations. The first thing that we think about is location of target effectiveness. The digestive system is a complicated, dynamic ecosystem that we've talked about. And the single greatest thing a probiotic can do for the body is A, colonize where it's meant to be colonized, i.e., if you understand the distributions of the ecology in the gut, where the lactobacillus primarily reside, where the E. coli reside, the bifidobacterium, you can understand why creating an idea or a formulation around target effectiveness is very important because the patterns of the body want to be honored and mimicked. The second thing you want a probiotic to do is exert a positive modulation effect within the local ecology and the physiology of the microbiome. If you can't have a probiotic that can adhere properly, it can't induce its effect of crowding out a potential pathogen. If you cannot supplement a probiotic in a way that you can deliver those microbes to where we want them, then all of the marketing about that product is really just kind of a fantasy because you have no validated science to back up its effect. And the third thing that you want a probiotic to do is to positively influence the immune system and the modulation of the immune system so the body is able to heal. Because you have to remember, every product that you take, it's not a product that heals the body or influences the change in the health status. It is the body's ability to receive a specific signal from said product and for the body to activate self-healing mechanisms or for the body to break out of the cycle of disease that it's in and stop the pathology where it currently is. And this is really important because the first aspect of developing a quality probiotic is the understanding of anatomy, physiology, and the interactions of the microbiology with those aspects of the human body. The second thing is understanding the concept of a keystone strain. So in this specific example, I'm defining a keystone as a central part of which all else is dependent upon. How do you figure out what a keystone strain is? Well, you look to nature because nature does not do anything by accident. The process of the natural birth, where the child is going through the vaginal canal and it's being inoculated by the mom's microbiome, is going to be the very first probiotic that that person's human body is ever exposed to. That is by design because the dynamics of a baby's birth and early days, there's a lot of changes happening. The gut becomes from an aerobic to an anaerobic environment, and the early microbes are going to be inoculated and they're going to be supported by the first exposure to the colostrum milk that the mom makes and the specific oligosaccharides, which are milk fibers that are designed to feed those initial bacteria of inoculation. Those are the Clostridia, the Firmicutes species, the Bacteroidetes species, and especially Bifidobacteria. And Bifido comprise the largest group within the infant's microbiome. Throughout this succession of the organism, the microbiota will increase diversity, with Bifido being the anchor keystone strain, which is why it's such an important microbe to include in a probiotic. Because they're so fragile, it's why it's a very hard microbe to ensure that it gets to the specific area where it lives, which is in the large intestine. Once you've defined your keystone strains and your formulations, then you have to understand that probiotics are not all created the same until you understand their identity. Most people will only live at the genus and the species level. It'll say it's a Lactobacillus acidophilus, it's a Bifidobacterium lactis infantis. That's like saying that is a human woman, that is a human male. It doesn't give any specificity to the person, i.e., a name, and doesn't allow them to have their personality shine through. And believe it or not, the personality that bacteria have can only be defined by understanding what strain it is, because it's the strain and the efficacious nature of the strain that exerts its benefits on the body. And any good probiotic company will have its efficaciousness defined by the strains that have supporting clinical benefits and clinical validation. I.e., if we use a Lactobacillus acidophilus, if it's an LA1, that's going to be different than an LA5. If it's a Bifidobacterium BIO4, that's going to be different than a BIO7 because they behave differently when they're in the actual realm of the microbiome exerting their effects within the body. So if a product just lists genus and species, we cannot say what personality that probiotic is actually going to have. Thus, we can't define any functions. So any marketing that are being made in terms of claims are either general things that are being cut and pasted, or it's a misrepresentation of the actual science. Luckily, not only do we have all of our strains designated, we know exactly what it is they do in isolation, and we know what it is they do in concert with their families, if you will, so we can actually shape a probiotic to the desired effects that we want. This is why we know what probiotics will modulate the immune system in terms of a stimulatory way. And knowing our clinicians, we can guide them based upon who that may or may not be good for. We can also know what probiotics will work in the opposite way. And if we have a client who's very sensitive, dealing with some sort of autoimmune-like presentation, we can guide our clinicians to a starting point and then have them obviously make all the clinical decisions where the rubber meets the road and they're actually working with a client, giving them specific advice. But if a probiotic can't do this, you can't make any specific claims. And in my opinion, and I would say the company would back me up on this, it's not honoring the science and raising the standard like it is that we want to do all the time. The next thing is understanding strain compatibility and formulation synergy. Just like people, sometimes two people simply do not get along, whereas other people get along famously having just met each other. So certain microbes are unable to coexist in hospitality because their effects may inhibit or crowd out the effects of other microbes. And what you see here in this picture is when you sometimes combine certain microbes, you have one cannibalizing or dominating in terms of its speed of replication, and the others can't replicate because all of the resources and all of the opportunity for colonization is going to be taken up by the more aggressive strain. So products designed to work in enhanced synergy, not only with microbes themselves, but also with supporting formulas. When you're formulating a probiotic, you want to know what probiotic food that you want to give those, which is why we did a lot of research in terms of bringing on sun fiber and why we have three different kinds of prebiotics, because we know what microbes those fibers are going to feed. We also have the idea of saying, oh, well, if you can use fiber, why not use enzymes to help optimize or enhance the effects of what probiotics can do? And we have that in two ways. With true fiber, we have bifidogenic enzymes, which actually create an environment that can multiply the speed of replication and the environmental opportunities of bifidobacteria. And then on the other side, in a probiotic formula, it's why we included specific enzymes with true flora. And that's because we know that the use of enzymes can be a way to help overcome problematic yeast and fungus so that the bacteria can help crowd out and eliminate the yeast without the need for antimicrobial herbs and other potentially stronger aspects. And then the last thing is the delivery, because you can have all of this wonderful science, but if the microbes can't get to where you want them to get, as I said before, it's either a nice idea or it's creative marketing. But fundamentally, these microbes are fragile species, and most of them are not able to survive in the duration of the digestive system because the pH values, the acidity levels, the temperature ranges, all are different based upon where you are within the gut. So this is where Randy's novel idea of delivery came through. And this product, sodium alginate, is one of our most prized patents because it debates and basically closes the loop on the criticism that most people have of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium probiotics, and that they cannot survive through the harsh conditions of the stomach. This is true, but if you build them a life raft, they can survive. And sodium alginate, when introduced into an acidic medium, changes its molecular structure to become that of an impenetrable life raft called alginic acid. So becomes sodium alginate. As it moves through the small intestine, pH starts to rise. That sodium alginate converts back to something called alginic acid, which is a pH dependent conversion, and it slowly dissolves, allowing those microbes to get where it is you want them to go. Small intestine and large intestine, which is defined as deep delivery or deep release in the GI tract. And believe it or not, that alginic acid just eventually becomes like a prebiotic fiber that gets degraded and it ends up feeding the very bacteria it protected on the way in. So that's the delivery thing. The second thing is, how do you wake them up? Now, most people think of lactostim as a prebiotic. In reality, it's more of a regenerator, rehydrator. The microbes themselves are freeze dried. So when you take a probiotic, those bacteria, they're not alive, they're not dead. They're kind of in a suspended animation. And what lactostim does is it stimulates the rehydration or the reconstitution of these microbes so they can produce more lactic acid, they can influence the local environment, and they can increase the speed of replication. And lactostim is just oleic acid and sunflower lecithin, both of which are fatty acid based constituents, oleic acid and olive oil. And sunflower lecithin is that weird looking goo that people take so they can get higher quantities of lecithin and phospholipids. But fundamentally, when combined together, they're a natural stimulant of the reconstitution of these microbes so they can influence the terrain, so they can adhere more optimally and they can increase their speed of replication, thus exerting their effects on the immune system, changing the local ecology of the gut. And ultimately, if someone's dealing with some sort of dysbiosis or infection, giving the gut the best chance of crowding out that potential pathogen and allowing itself to get back to a state of eubiosis. And we've done multiple tests with other people's probiotics to see, does lactostim work across the board, regardless of what probiotic it is or what strain or species of bacteria we're using. And the case is always a resounding yes, because the speed of population increases over the course of time. And because there's hundreds of trillions of bacteria in the gut, and if you're taking a probiotic capsule that has 50 billion, to me, the analogy is like pouring a glass of water into a swimming pool. you're not going to see the water level rise, but doing so on a regular basis with the support of making sure that those microbes can adhere and replicate and inhabit the microbiome and shift the local ecology over the course of days, weeks, and months, you can start to see a real change because 50 billion over time, as it adds up, can really shift the unique identification print of what the microbiome looks like. So those are all the technical considerations. You have to start with understanding the philosophy of how the body works. Then you need to figure out where are you getting your stuff from? Are you picking specific microbes that have the understanding of functions and the strain designations? Do they play nicely together? Can you formulate a profile of microbes that has an overall big picture benefit with having subcategorical benefits? Can you deliver them and can you wake them up? That is what came out of the story of starting with food in 1975, farming and agriculture in 1990, a health and wellness company with one specific product in the year 2000. And fast forward to today, off the top of my head, I don't know exactly how many SKUs we have, but we're probably coming up on 40, 50 SKUs. And we're continuously refining and improving everything that it is we do. There's another side to this whole thing when it comes to making a good product, and it's not just the science that goes in it, it's the business side of it. It's the customer consideration, the customer service side. Sourcing and manufacturing matters. You can get microbes from all walks of life. You can get human strain, you can get dairy strain, you can get soil derived. When it comes to an effective probiotic, there is no better source than a human strain probiotic. There's also no more expensive source than a human strain probiotic. So in supplements, I always tell people the price is typically reflective of the quality of what's in the bottle. And sourcing strains from the most well-researched providers with the longest history of production is a key foundational variable of selection. The second thing is no filler strains or proprietary formulations or blends, or looking at other ingredient listings on the label to make sure that what you're getting is primarily the active ingredients and nothing that needs to be there and everything that does need to be there to support those formulations and their efficacy. GMP certification, that's a good manufacturing process certification. We operate to the highest standards possible when it comes to the creation of these products. We're perpetually testing, ensuring potency, ensuring quality, and making sure that what it is we're giving you is actually exceeding the claims that we're making when it comes time for you to take the product. And we also do a lot of third-party post-production testing. But one thing we have with Theralac is the Informed Sport certification. An informed sport, most people think of as a performance enhancing substance screen. What informed sport also does is it screens for all kinds of environmental toxins, pollutants, and our product passed with flying tests. So the purity of the product is second to none, in addition to the fact that if you do have a young athlete in your life, anything with head trauma is always going to negatively impact the gut. So probiotics are really an unknown sport support product. So we're making sure that we're always keeping very detailed records of understanding what the probiotic strains are doing, the quantities, the potencies, and that's why we can make the claim that we can guarantee potency through expiration, not up into, well after, and I'll show you what that looks like. Second aspect's packaging. This might seem like a very boring topic to think about, but packaging is one of the most powerful influences over the quality of a product because especially in the case of probiotics, these little organisms are living things, which means they have a sensitivity to their environment, and specifically the big four: moisture, heat, light, and air or oxygen. And these are things that most end consumers or even practitioners don't think about. If you're buying a supplement, a probiotic, for example, if it's in a plastic bottle, do you know if that product was stored in Florida in the summertime in a warehouse that wasn't properly air conditioned? Does that have an effect? Absolutely, it does. What effect does the bottle itself have? Microplastics are becoming a very popular thing nowadays, and detoxifying microplastics might be something that you do because you've been taking supplements in plastic bottles for years. How about the manufacturing standards, or how about quality control? And the whole aspect of potency through the lifespan. There are certain products that say guaranteed until date of expiration. So in many cases, that might not even be true, and people might be taking dead products. You know, the energy of a product has a very strong influence over the potential influence it has And if anyone here is a bioenergetic tester, an applied kinesiology tester, I can't tell you how many of our accounts I've spoken to and I've heard from our customer service or our reps that this product line is one of the most decisive yes or no. And when it works for people who do energetic bioimpedance testing, it is super powerful and super effective, which is even going beyond the biochemical sciences, the claims that we're making. So, from a packaging consideration, we always use light refractory blue glass bottles and we flush them with nitrogen. So, this way we disperse all of the oxygen. Who knew science and chemistry was useful and entertaining, but also kind of cool? The other thing we do is we package them with oxygen scavenging and water absorbent desiccant packs. And then we induction seal them so that nothing of the outside world gets pulled into the bottle as we're putting the actual seal over it. At our facility, we store everything at minus 10 degrees directly prior to shipping. So there's no attrition based upon negative heat or temperature influences. And this also allows our probiotics to be totally shelf stable through expiration, although we still do encourage you to keep them in a cooler environment if possible. But it also removes the need for us to ship anything with an ice pack because the bottle technically is an ice pack as soon as it comes out of the freezer and stays such likely during most of the shipping process. And this is what all the consideration allows us to do. It allows us to get to guarantee the strength, which is actually greater than what we claim through the process of expiration. And this is why our potency after expiration gives us confidence in our money back guarantee. Because potencies are always above claims at times of manufacturer. And if they are stored properly, they're still above claim at the time of expiration, but you have to make sure that you store these things properly to ensure this. And this is why we offer our money back guarantee to people because we're confident in our products. And if you are going to take it, and even if you forget to take it over the course of a couple of years and it's in your fridge, it's still going to do the same job. This is interesting. So on the left-hand side, we have a Ferrolac assessment that was kept in the freezer for 250 weeks. For those who can't do the mental math, that's 4.8 years. So 5 years after something was stored in the freezer, we were dramatically over the potency because the potency stayed absolutely flat. And we do multiple certifications of analysis on an ongoing basis to make sure that the conditions are always optimal so we can replicate the quality of the product time after time. Because some cases, as companies grow and evolve, things can slip in terms of quality control because we're still an independently owned and family operated company. We have to adhere to these standards for us to be that which we claim we are, that sets ourselves apart and raises the standard of what it is we bring into the industry. So that's the second aspect of it. All the things that people don't think about unless you're in the industry. How do we package it properly? How do we ensure the environments of the packaging are optimal? How do we make sure that what we're shipping to people is exactly what it is that they're expecting? And can we make sure that what we're promising is going to be the end result in terms of product efficacy over the course of years, even after the expiration date of said product? Absolutely, it is. And this brings us to the end result because we are the only company who does things this specific way. We have the sodium alginate, we have the lactostim, so we have unique patents that no one else has. We've gone to the deep detail of doing the strain designations. We've sourced the best quality strains, and we've done the research to understand what these robust strains do and how they can affect the gut and the immune system in a positive way. We can also make claims that might help a clinician not choose the wrong product for their client, given their client's current situation. So it's these details that do set us apart. And one of the first statements I ever heard when I joined the company in 2019 was from Mr. Jeff Thurston. The most expensive probiotic is the one that you take that doesn't work. And that is true. Price comparison is not something we do because what we offer is something that can actually be competed with. So that's something that we really hang our hats on. And I encourage every person to become a label reader because I asked you guys at the beginning, how do you determine what a quality product is? What is your framework for assessment? So if we look at this label of a unnamed specific product, we see all the red flags. We see proprietary blend containing 1 billion live cultures. We see gene, we don't see strain designation. We see species, but we don't know what it is they're doing. We see some incompatibility in strains. Not a lot of people know that certain strains you put together will actually not allow the others to do anything within the gut. And then you see a lot of other ingredients that may or may not be good for someone, or they may be a lot of filler because most of the science in this product, I should say most of the money didn't go into the science, it potentially went into the marketing because the us too thing is becoming very popular. And we have a world of social media influencers who are not scientific experts. They are people who speak well. They are people who may represent themselves well because of how they look. But the ultimate reality is this is the deep science that sets us apart from other people when it comes to making the claims. And this is why we have our probiotics that are distinguished for where they're used in the body, and we can guide our clinicians as to how to use them specifically. So we have two different categories. We have our systemic GI probiotic formulas. We're going to start with one that does not get a lot of representation or discussion. And I want to start by saying the exciting news for this product, because it's already been enhanced once since the acquisition of US enzymes, because it was an existing formulation. We actually removed the Streptococcus thermophilus, which was an incompatible strain with some of our bifido. This product is going to get upgraded and updated again for 2026 to really give it what it is it needs in terms of the scientific analysis and representation. Because even though on the label it doesn't have specific strain designations, they are the same strains that we're using in the other products. It just has not been updated. And what Bioenzyme does really well, first and foremost, if someone is healthy, it's a great probiotic to take to just anchor that state of health within the gut because it is the most microbially diverse product we have in terms of strain count, not in terms of overall quantity, but specifically strain count, which supports biodiversity within the gut because we know biodiversity in the microbiome is typically correlated with greater longevity, greater overall health, and the less likelihood of dying from some sort of degenerative condition. The other thing that Bioenzyme does really well is I like it for a post-antibiotic use for a couple reasons. One, because of the diversity. Number two, it contains two specific strains that are really good for post-antibiotic management because after a course of antibiotics, the gut is in a very fragile state. When you thin the herd of microbes, you negatively influence the terrain and you alter the pH within the gut. Saccharomyces boulardii, which is actually a non-pathogenic yeast, not only helps to support the repletion of the microbes that the gut needs after a course of antibiotics, it is a yeast that can actually potentially crowd out the growth of pathogenic yeasts like Candida albicans. Bacillus subtilis is another one that helps to anchor the microbiome because it is not super sensitive to most antibiotics. So Bioenzyme is post-antibiotic use. It can be used on a regular basis as a daily dose. It says 2 capsules per dose. You can also do a half dose at one daily, or you can do 2 capsules 3 times a week, twice a week as a way to keep incorporating the stimulation of positive microbes coming into the GI system, but not necessarily needing a therapeutic megadose for a specific targeted condition or an effect that you're after. Theralac Pro is where our professional probiotics start, and this is our flagship product. And this is what I call full GI coverage because it has both 4 strains of lactobacillus, which is more of a small intestine, although there is a large influence of lactobacillus within the colon, but it helps to protect the small intestine from any sort of pathogen related issues. Does a good job of also supporting the colon because the two different kinds of bifidobacterium are also immune modulators and they are hard strains to deliver and they're essential strains because they're part of that keystone thing. What Theralac does really well is immune modulation. We have certain strains that help to stimulate the immune system via potentially the upregulation of cytokines, which are cell signaling molecules, but also the ability to downregulate the immune system by cytokine signaling in another way. So it creates this idea of a teeter-totter balance effect. The other thing it does really well is it's our best product for competitive exclusion against pathogens. And we do have extremely high dose protocols for short periods of time for things like C. diff and various other pathogens that are potentially antibiotic resistant. And we've talked about this in other webinars. If food poisoning is something that you're unfortunately been afflicted with, Theralac Pro has saved many people from clutching a toilet bowl for potential days at a time. I like using Theralac for my clients who have to use antibiotics intra-antibiotic use dosed 4 hours away because you don't want a probiotic taken too closely to an antibiotic because the strains are susceptible to the effects of the drugs. But to minimize the collateral damage to the gut as a result of antibiotic use, Theralac dosed during a course of antibiotics is my favorite way to actually anchor what gut health you can sustain when you're trying to kill something, and also using Theralac for systemic pathogen-driven dysbiosis because of its ability to be a competitive excluder with strains that are very adept at colonizing the mucosa in both the small and the large intestine. The other aspect that we do, and this is something that we do that I don't think anyone else does, is our location-specific GI probiotic formulas. True Bifido Pro is our colon-specific formula because it has 5 very effective strains of bifidobacterium that are targeting the colon specifically because that's the principal site of where bifido reside, and they have an immune calming effect because the large quantities of microbes in the large intestine interacting with all of the immune cells that either scan the mucosa or live right at the epithelial barrier have a very important relationship when it comes to communication with each other. Typically speaking, you want microbes to talk to the immune system with cytokines to direct the immune cells to let them know that everything with the microbiome is A-OK, meaning there aren't too many pathogens, there's not imbalanced growth or trajectories of where the development of the microbiome is going. So this way, the immune system does not have to be too hypervigilant. And this product was really designed for those very sensitive people because some people's immune systems are stuck in a mode of hypervigilance where they're unable to take most probiotics because it actually throws them into a flare-up. I believe it was Dr. Horowitz who was one of the key consultants or the person who requested a product like this because he focused on the hardest to fix Lyme cases. So anything that you can think of when it comes to immune activation, again, long COVID, the research with long COVID and the decimation of bifidobacterium is getting stronger and stronger, and colonic irritable bowel diseases, and you can probably lump in IBS, which is not a disease, but a functional motility disorder. Anytime you think colonic dysbiosis, issues with evacuation or changing stool bowel habits, True Bifido is the go-to. It's also my favorite probiotic to start with because it's going to be the one that potentially has no negative effect for the person who is unsure about taking something like a probiotic. TrueFlora, on the other hand, is marketed as a bio-cleansing probiotic. So whereas the other two were professional probiotics, TrueFlora is a little bit different. It's kind of an in-betweener where it's a probiotic, but it's also an antimicrobial, anti-organismic agent because it has 2 very aggressive strains of lactobacillus. And I use aggressive in their ability to generate lactic acid and to acidify an environment, plus the bacillus coagulans, which helps to competitively exclude the colonization of yeast. And we combine this with a biofilm digesting enzyme combination. And the reason we have biofilm digesting enzymes is certain things like yeast and fungus pathogens are actually hard to eradicate. If anyone's been trying to deal with candida off and on for years and it comes and it goes, things like athlete's foot, yeast infections, what have you, you'll know that taking them out for good is actually quite an art. And the reason is they have their own way to modulate confusing and evading the immune system. So a Candida albicans can actually create a biofilm cloak, so the immune system can't actually start to degrade it and get at it, and it creates what's called a hyphae. A hyphae is a little tunnel, and it can burrow directly through the epithelial lining, and that's what can create a systemic Candida albicans infection, where it can actually get directly into the circulatory system and migrate all over the body. So this is really an antifungal, anti-yeast, small intestinal cleansing supplement that targets fungus, yeast, and small intestinal dysbiosis, specifically SIBO, which is another very challenging thing to eradicate. Works much better when you also combine it with Sunfiber or True Fiber prebiotics, in addition to supporting with digestive enzymes, because a lot of these things that happen in the small intestine, from a functional perspective, these organisms and microbes are attracted there because the body's not doing its job. It's a little bit of a different philosophy framework, but we attract the things that our body no longer does optimally for us. So they're simply going to where there's undigested food and there's ample resources for these organisms to survive and thrive. And this is really how we framed all of our probiotics. And this is a quick little association. Bioenzyme, repletion after antibiotics, and maintenance of microbial diversity. Theralac, intra-antibiotics. You can also use it as an after pathogenic infections, systemic immune modulation, and systemic microbiome influence of the small and large intestine. Bifido is our colon-based formula, and think of this as the down regulator of immune activation within the gut and therefore within the body. And True Flora, not Florida, not that hot. True Flora is a yeast fungal target, so issues in the small intestine, helping to manage SIBO, and it's a really nice introduction to doing some bacterial cleansing for people because sometimes something like an herbal formula, a biofilm buster, any of these antimicrobial formulas, which are going to create a massive die-off reaction and a potential Herxheimer's reaction, might be beyond the capacity of the person's tolerance for things such as that because all of these things have to ultimately be detoxified. And if the person's not healthy or energetic enough, it actually might further the problem. We always get questions about dosing. And one of the original philosophies that came with the creation of Theralac marketing was take 3 a week. There's nothing to say that you have to take a probiotic daily. And I actually think that it is good to induce a little bit of a cycle when it comes to not only taking probiotics and the frequency, but the kinds of probiotics that you're taking. Because if you are recommending these to a client, it's probably a good idea that you're experiencing what you can take away as an anecdote in terms of how your body reacted, knowing that's not automatically going to be experienced as a mimic in someone else, but it is good to have experiential knowledge in accompaniment with the science and the marketing that we put forth. So there's nothing to say that you can't take 1 or 2 probiotics a week, and if it works well for you, that's great. It doesn't sound like the greatest sales advice, but it's honest scientific validation and clinical wisdom because we want people to have the greatest possible outcomes when it comes to taking the products that we are providing for them, because we're always trying to raise the standard while honoring the entirety of the science of what got us here. So that was a lot of information, everyone. I want to thank you as always for being part of these webinars. It's really a lot of fun to do the research in this and find different ways to tell all of these stories. And I do want to end with reminding everyone that we are really upping our social media game, our education game. So do please like and subscribe to everything that we have on all of our platforms, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We have all of these lectures available up on YouTube. If you want to go back and watch a past one, this one will be up very soon. The other thing too is make sure that you're checking every month for your newsletters and your emails. And if you're not signed up for our newsletter, you can actually do that directly on the website. You can go to the homepage and subscribe to our email list. And for new subscribers, you can look for promotional offers if you're not already subscribed. And the last thing is our podcast is starting to gain some traction. We're getting some great feedback. We're going to have some great guests coming up in the next coming months. And we are anywhere you can find a podcast. Apple Music, if you use that, Spotify, all the major outlets are there to spread the message of the Following Your Gut podcast, where we get to interview some really awesome people who give you the ins and outs of not only their clinical wisdom, but the story of what it is that got them passionate about health, because we want to infect everyone in a positive way with what it is that we love so much about being in this industry and creating products that are really helping to move the needle in people's lives, improving the overall quality and well-being for everyone who comes into contact with them. So as always, everyone, thank you so much for your time. I hope everything's going well in life. And we have one more part 3 next month that will take us into Christmas. And then 2026, here we come. I wish everyone a great rest of your evening, and we'll see you soon.